Tony Sandberg, currently Director for e-mobility scale-up, and I will talk about innovation and the barriers, hurdles that exist within the big enterprise, and they are focused on the leadership and the challenge about that. But first, it's really about changing the culture. I will talk about leadership and also, but someone here mentioned strategy, but all of you know the quote from Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we'll talk about examples of that I have experienced throughout my history at Scania. And we will talk about the magic number 3. And I think you will learn later on why this is a cliffhanger. But 3 is important. A little bit of myself. I was born and raised by a truck driving father. So I am really experienced to trucks and the transport industry. Currently working for Scania. I've been working for Scania for 25 years now. So that's the only employer I have had, meaning that I have no experience from other companies and other environments. So keep that in mind when you go through the examples. And now I have delivered parts of the future. You see up to the right, that's called the Scania NXT. It's a future concept vehicle for the urban mobility of 2030. It is automated, it is electric, and it's on the shared platform. So this vehicle can actually be both a bus and a truck at the same time during the day. And you can also see from my resume that I have been working at Scania, as you see, but I also have connections to the research community at academia, public funding, and most of the time I've been working with the forefront of future things. And I will give you some examples from my history at Scania throughout this presentation. But first, it's important for you to understand the environment that I have been operating in for 25 years now. Scania is an old and rather proud company, founded 1891. We have been profitable since 1934. That's quite a long strike, and that makes something to a company. So keep that in mind. We have, at least for the time that I've been on Scania, work on a stable market. With the business cycles of 10 years, the market is rather predictable when it goes up, and the demands of the customers is also rather predictable. We have had a strong leader, pictured down to the left in Leif Östling. He was the CEO of Scania for more than 2 decades, and he really pushed Scania into the direction of being customer-first company. So we are very much customer-centric. And the second picture to the left, and the yellow truck there, is also an example when we did one of the big launches in the mid-90s. It were pushed by time restrictions and the introduction of Scania to the stock market. But unfortunately, the quality of that product was not good enough for the market. So we had really big problems after the introduction for the entire company. And that led to, I would say, a very risk-averse organization focusing on methods, processes, etc., to avoid risks. So keep that in mind. And I would state that those factors together creates a very strong monoculture where we have one product, and that you can see in bottom right. That's the modular toolbox that's very famous of Scania, but it is in fact one product. It also creates that we are focused on only one process to the market. It also gives us the fact that I would state that we only have one customer model, and it creates also one leadership culture. So those are some things that I want you to keep in mind throughout the presentation. Also, a couple of, I would say, 10 years, 15 years from now, back in history, we started to realize that the world is changing. We realized that we were on a stable, predictable market, which had a linear type of change, which led us to have linear processes internally, waterfall processes and stage gate. We were considering ourselves as a premium product producer. And with that, we were a reliable and stable follower on the market that customers could trust. That was really important in our customer offer back then. And then I and others worked on the disruptive technologies, being connectivity, electrification, and automation, that all of those has the power to disrupt our industry. Meaning that we realized some years ago that we will be working on an unstable market that is unpredictable, and the business environment will not be known. And also through, I would say, through connectivity in internet, we are now seeing an exponential type of change in speed. And in this situation, the management of Scania decided that we should be the leader in the shift to a sustainable transport system. So you can see that we embrace the challenge of creating problems for the environment, and we want to do something about it. And we also took the opportunity in this shift to saying, now we want to go from being a follower to be a leader. And that brings a lot of stress on the organization. What we did back then, and this is 10, 12 years ago, we tried to find ways to balance growth and renewal, meaning that we need to balance the exploitation process and the exploration process. And I guess you're all aware about what it means, but exploration is exploring new business technologies, ideas for tomorrow's growth. But exploitation is continued growth around the existing proven technology and proven businesses. And the trick here is to find some interaction between those. So that's what we started off with. And this is in fact nothing else than the Ambidexterity model, where you have two tasks to handle at the same time. You have exploitation, where they focus on cost and profit, margins and productivity, which leads to rather formal and bureaucratic processes, and you want to have low risk. And I think you recognize my description of Scania from the beginning here to the left. But in exploration, you need to focus on innovation and growth. You want to have entrepreneurial and growth milestones and mindsets. You want to be adaptive and cross-functional, and you need to manage high risk. So these are, I would say, the opposites of each other, and you need to manage both of them within one organization. And in theory, by then, it can be designed in different ways. These are 4 examples. And you can see to the left, temporal separation, meaning that you swap the entire organization from time to time, either focusing on exploitation or exploration. Or you can do at the second illustration, structural ambidexterity, where you separate the new from the traditional things and only connect them through management. Or the third example, contextual ambidexterity, where you mix and interact everything. So everybody is involved with the 2 tasks of exploitation and exploration. Or you can do the 4th domain separation and take certain areas, tasks, and separate those. So these are basically the 4 ways you can manage ambidexterity on a company level, of course. And as you might have understood, Scania decided to have the 3rd alternative here, contextual ambidexterity. And all of those, of course, has pros and cons in their setup. So what I will go through now in this presentation is some of the experiments that I have executed during my years at Scania, trying to push for change and more innovation and more exploration. So these are illustrations of my reference bank, most of them illustrating trucks, but it's more about the methods, the processes, and the way of working in these. So we will go through them. But first, starting with the STAR model, perhaps you're aware about it. It is how you combine strategy, structure, processes, rewards, and people. And it's more about organizational setup. You need to have all of these aspects in order to be successful. And what we, as I said in the beginning, my starting point for most of these things were public partnerships, triple helix partnerships. And that's where most of this stuff will be about. So one of the first things I tried was to include a strategy to unite the organization. And we will come back to that example later on. It was not successful singly, so then we added power or structure, meaning that we added a budget frame for this. And we will go through this together. As I mentioned, we created the NXT as a top-down initiative from the CEO, and we will talk about that. And we also tried different processes to manage this, and we will go through these things as well. But the bottom line is that we have found that in most cases, and almost all, we get stuck in the people and the rewards areas because we didn't have the right setups for those aspects. So going through the examples, and this is actually number 2, autonomous transport system. In this setup, I was the line manager for research and development of autonomous vehicles, early days in 2008. The method here was that I had my own organization. We started up with 5, and after 5 years, we were 20 people. And we wanted to explore partnerships with public funding agencies, universities, others. And they really initiated here also the capability of going from desktop research to actually building prototypes and showing them in real life. So in the picture here, you have an illustration of an autonomous mining truck that we actually built. And to the right, you have platooning trucks operating on a Swedish highway, which was also part of the research projects that we did. And some of the findings from this experiment was that we had great publicity. We actually found customers rather quickly that were interested in this. But it was hard to get support from other parts of the organization. I had my small organization of 20 engineers, but when we needed support from other parts of the organization, they were kind of busy doing other stuff. And in both these cases, we failed to find the business model. We started off with technology which we believed could improve customer operations, but we couldn't find the business model. And we also, in these cases, failed to combine product and services, because both these things are bigger than just the product. We need to include services and connected services in this offering. So we did some progress, but we failed in some areas. The next example I wanted to share with you is what I call a joint operating model, where I tried to solve the problem that I couldn't get support from other departments within R&D. So at 2013, I moved into another position, meaning I was the research director for all technology areas globally for Scania. So I wanted to align the efforts and utilize a strategy for that. The method here was similar but slightly different. I went to a smaller organization than my previous, but I believe that if we have the joint strategy, we can align organization. We wanted to continue with partnerships and public funding. So what we did is we created this operation model that you see to the left, where we have projects on the bottom. We have a tactical decision process that we set up and that we were responsible for. So we were all governing the decision process, and we created the strategy process, meaning how we take signals, requests from the outside world, how we create our own strategy. We have the budget component, and we can set priorities, how we execute things. The findings here was that one of the things creating a budget here, and when we created the budget, we didn't only say we have X amount of money here, because I knew that at that time the organization was very much controlled by the number of headcounts in each department. So by intention, I proposed to the CTO of Scania at that time that I want to have 100 headcounts. And of course, they need to come from someone else. And in fact, that created a lot of turbulence when I was allowed to have 100 headcounts to use in this operating model, because they were needed to be taken from someone else. Even though the setup was built on the fact that I will lend them back to the line organization, I wanted them to create the work and work in the projects. Another finding here was that the line organization weren't able to create the strategy, manage the partnerships, and deliver results. There were too many tasks at the same time. And we also realized that the line organization did, in fact, use the resources that they had been lended by me to do other things. It was more a sense of urgency creating or solving today's problem than thinking about tomorrow's problems. So we learned some things. It wasn't really successful the whole way. And as I said, in the fourth example here, this kind of NXT, we got the assignment from the CEO, but it actually started way before that. We had the idea already when I took the position at 2013 that we want to build something that unites the organization. This won't be a flagship project. So we got a go in 2014, but the project was cancelled. We got a go in 2015 with R&D management support, but the project was cancelled. And in 2016, we were called to the CEO of Scania, and he said, I want to do this. So we really had his top-level support. And some of the learnings here then was that, well, it was still not easy, even though it came from the CEO. We learned that the decisions are, in fact, not communicated. So after the formal decision, we still needed to walk through the whole organization to convince all participants that this should be done and explain why it should be done. So it really took us 6 months to secure the resources. And here we are talking about 10 people building this vehicle. And the reflection was that this concept that we and the CEO proposed was too far away from their normal operation and the normal day-to-day job for the line organization. But in fact, we had the sponsor support from high level. We finally realized that managed to get full-time resources, and we co-located them in a separate building. And in fact, those things were the key to success. So we successfully demonstrated this concept in 2019 for the public. So you can, on YouTube, you can find videos and other stuff on this, because it can really operate. And even though this was initiated from the CEO, of course, it had a lot of new novel technologies included. But as I said at the beginning, it was also intended to be a shared platform between goods operators in the city, but also bus operators in the city and garbage collectors. So we really wanted these 3 different customers today to share this asset, because this vehicle can reconfigure itself from a bus to a truck and to a garbage collector throughout the day. But still, we failed to find the business model for this. And that's rather interesting as well. And a final example, I believe, is that we took another approach. We wanted to really explore the ideas and the creativity of our own employees. So we initiated an idea incubator, and we set it to do things outside our current scope. The method here is a combination of all the other stuff before, but it was for employees. It was an open application. We facilitated the process. We created a separate space for there to be full-time. We had the top management support for this, but it was really important to keep the line organization informed that we had the support, what we intended to do. And we also find a way to support the line organization, meaning that we could, if one of their employees were accepted to the program and were taken out of operation for 6 months, we will help them to get a consultant as a replacement. And we will also pay for their consultant. And in this process, we also trained the angels and the dragons that are part of the process, the selecting processes here. So some of the findings here is that, yes, we found some promising concepts, promising ideas. It was also included in this process that the carrot, so to speak, for the employees would be that they could get the opportunity to start their own company if they were successful. So this builds on a process for 6 months where they make the proof of concept, their MVPs, start to sell to the first customers, and then scale and start their own company. But we as an organization were at that time not ready to start any new companies, and we were not ready or either to involve external investors. So we wanted to keep everything internally here. And we realized that one single part of the line organization still could block everything due to their own priorities. It could be either budget things or they refuse to release their employees into the process. But most certainly, we realized here that design thinking is a method that we need to work with to identify new needs. And we also unify technology enablers here with business potential. So design thinking was identified as a key method here to solve some of the challenges that I mentioned before. So some conclusions here then. Then we have barriers in many dimensions. And if you go to Galbraith's STAR model here, it's about strategy, structure, processes, rewards, and people. and look on what did we find and look into these examples and some others, to be honest. The strategy first, as I said in the beginning, the management of Scania stated we want to move from being a follower to a leader. And that was very confusing for the organization because it could be interpreted quite differently. And it was what that meant. When we talk about structure, it's clear that we only had one channel for prioritization. And in fact, the line organization controls the budget and the resources, even though we have many cross-functional dependencies. And another conclusion is that we lack a governance for innovation. Talking about processes, we had the previous processes, I would say. In order to start, you need to know the results and you need to show a good return on investment. We were stuck in continuous improvements or exploitation. We also realized that the development of technology and development of businesses are not aligned. They don't work hand in hand and in pace. And in fact, we realized that the method for explorative business development is missing. There were no structure. Talking about people, yeah, we are still an organization of experts with focus on details, and we lack the entrepreneurs and generalists. And perhaps the most severe one, the rewards. Most rewarding in this culture is actually to deliver concrete results here and now. That is what's being rewarded. It is a focus on short-term profitability to avoid risk, and there is actually no incentive for partnerships and collaborating with others. And we have very weak reward systems for learning and exploration. So this was, in fact, the summary that we did, and then we started to look for solutions then. And first, a reflection on why we end up here. And I think it is the starting point that we did. We need to work with exploration and exploitation simultaneously. And that is fairly easy then to do a polarization. And polarization is a simplification that causes problems. It's most of the time used in fairy tales, like Star Wars, but you also see in the US election, Trump versus Biden. It is always good versus bad, new versus old, agile versus lean, etc. You're making something against something else. And that is a simplification that is problematic in this sense. And I believe that in a customer-centric organization like Scania, we need a bridge over the valley of death. And most of the time in literature, you talk about these deaths on the market, but there is in fact an internal bridge, or internal valley of death in big organizations for the processes, especially when we are targeting customer-focused. So we really need a bridge. And one of the methods that we did then find a couple of years ago now was the model of 3 horizons. And that could actually work as a bridge because regardless of the definition that you take, the left or the right, you can say in horizon 1 or core, you focus on improving something that exists here and now, continuous improvements and exploitation. And in horizon 3 or transformational, you work with breakthrough technology, breakthrough businesses models, and you work with something that's extremely new to the company, and that is exploration. But to create the bridge, you need the horizon 2. And there you need to work on from both sides to create the bridge. So you cannot build the bridge from only one side, you need to build it from both sides. And that is really my finding, that is key to success here. And that is also why I started saying 3 is a magic number, because you need to have 3 parts in this. You need to continue to earn money here and now, you need to take care of the future, the uncertainty, and you need to scale up the things that you find and start adapting that to adjacent businesses. So 3 is part of the solution. And then also in a customer-centric company, you can also apply this to it's called diffusion and innovation. I guess you're aware about it in this community. It's about differentiating different customer logics because different customer groups have different logics when they do businesses. And what I feel is different is their needs, but also their risk willingness will be different. And coming back to Scania core values that we want to deliver value to the customer. And we can only deliver value when we deliver it or we solve someone's needs. So if the needs are different, the solution also then needs to be different. And this is a fine illustration, I think, about this diffusion of innovation, showing that, well, customers are not alike. Some customers to the left here, they want to have the new stuff. And some want to have it as it was before. But the majority market, they are the pragmatics. They want to have return on their investments. They want to have predictability. They want to have hard facts, I would say. But in the early market, it's not like that. They don't need to have return on their investments. They don't need to have business logic because they make business on their gut feeling. And perhaps they see opportunities that others don't see, or they want to use this for public relations, PR, or they get another businesses that due to this fact. But it's important here to state that also between the early adopters and the early majority, there is something called the chasm that you nearly need to bridge. And all of these models are, of course, combinable. And this is one illustration that I like. You can see the model of 3 horizons in the bottom, the diffusion innovation in the middle, and the hype curve on top. And even though I'm not quite sure that the boundaries are exactly where they're illustrated here, it's almost right. This means that there is logic into these models, and all of these models are in fact built on psychology. Coming back to the question of ambidexterity. So as I said, we need to have 3 objectives. We need to have 3 value streams. We need to continue to improve profitability. We need to be fast to scale up new ventures. And we need to discover new opportunities to continue to evolve. And what I have found then, looking at literatures, is the concept of dual innovation is the one that fits my thoughts and my beliefs in this the best. And it's a rather good framework to manage both exploration and exploitation. It's about optimizing core, reshaping core, creating new. And you can use different kind of wordings here, of course. But you can also see that the objectives are different, the organizational setup is different, the funding is different, the culture is different, the capabilities are different, and the people needs to be different as well. And that is really key. And keep in mind then that the center part here is not either or, it's mixed or blended all the time. And that is really key to avoiding the polarization and the simplification of that. And to bring it back then, dual innovation is really a way to handle ambidexterity using parts that I showed you before. You use structural ambidexterity and you separate the most different parts, Horizon 1 and Horizon 3, because they are completely different in their missions and the methods. And then you use contextual ambidexterity only in Horizon 2, because this is the most tricky part. Here you want to create the bridge between Horizon 1 and 3. And this is where you need to understand the both sides of the core and the new. Here you need to speak 2 languages, so to speak. And if you want to have this system operating over time, then you also need to do temporal separation, meaning that you need to transfer knowledge and culture by an active exchange of employees or personnel through these different zones. And then you can get this model to work over time as well. So what I'm doing currently then, I'm heading something called e-mobility scale-up. And now we have actually, by intention, positioned ourselves in the middle, at the most difficult part, Horizon 2, where we work with both adapt and scale of the market. So we're standing in the middle of the chasm, so to speak. And we have some scopes here. We want to increase the speed and impact. We want to be operating here in the intersection. We want to reshape the core by adapting. And we want to bridge the external chasm between the early adopters and majority customers, showing them that what's possible. And also bridge the internal chasm between R&D and established business units. And we have also the end-to-end responsibility for this small series. So what we are doing and how we are doing it is really to do both explore and exploit. In the exploit area, we're working really hard to accelerate and scale our businesses. and we are working from the size of 1 up to X or small numbers, meaning that we work with innovators and early adopters on the market. On the explore part, we are trying to understand the evolving transport ecosystem and also, of course, the potential to grow our businesses in this environment, where we need to work with society, users, technology, infrastructure, policies, and customers, etc., and go from the problem space, solution space into the market space. But we also want to be a forerunner internally how we work. And as I said, we have the unique end-to-end responsibility that we have in my organization, the first customer contact to understand the needs. We have responsibility for creating the solutions, both production and development, but also we have responsibility for the deployment and the full life length of the solution. So that's quite unique. And some of the success factors that we have identified is that, yes, we are a line organization, but we are small enough or big enough to run and enable this. And then we utilize the fact that we are a virtual company in this company with our own profit and loss responsibility to be able to be follow up. And we are also managing a cross-functional value stream. And as I said, it has end-to-end responsibility. So these are some of the key components that we have identified to be able to do this. But of course, we have some challenges left. The dual scope still exists. It is still a challenge, but as I said, we have by intention position ourselves in this center point because we think we can manage it. Another challenge is that we want to create a new way of working, but we are urged also to reuse existing processes and existing parts of the organization in order to spread the learnings. And another challenge is that we have the resources in the line organization. Even though I have a mechanism now to purchase results from the line organization, they are still deciding what to do on a daily basis. But we have confidence in the setup and believe that this could actually work this time. So that was about it. Sigrid, how did I do on time?
Brilliant, just in time. Thank you so much, Tony. That was really interesting. Please, everyone, go ahead and write your questions in the chat. And so we make sure we get answers to everything from Tony. I don't think we have anything yet, so I might just take the chance to ask one of mine. I was curious because you mentioned in your examples that previously the business model was in many cases the trickiest part, or maybe not the trickiest part, but one thing that was tricky. And how are you making sure this time that you'll sort of find the business model?
Yeah, good question. One of the things that I didn't mention is that I now have moved to the other side of the Scania organization. Throughout my whole career, I have been at R&D, working with the technology, trying to bridge over to the business. But as 1st of May, I have moved to sales and marketing, and now I am embedded in the business development organization. So now I have connections to the technology and can work on that, but now I am embedded in the business development.
Right. Yeah, that seems that it should maybe be a good change. So let's see. We have some feedback here, very concrete examples and experiences. That's nice. We have a question from Stephen. How much has upper management been key in this?
Yeah, I would say quite a lot. Innovation and partnerships as well are very much relation. It's a relation by people, so that's important. So one of my success factors over the time has been that I have good relations with the top management of the company. So I've had the air support when needed, but then the freedom to operate rather independently throughout the times. But of course, it also has shown us some of the examples that the communication and the information flow through the company doesn't always work, like the NXT example. We got the assignment from the CEO directly, but and even if he took time to have meetings with his direct reports and my boss in between, to say this is sanctioned, we should do this. There were other parts of the organization that were not invited and could of course not be invited, that didn't know that this project existed, and then also were kind of hesitant on bringing in the resources that we needed.
Thanks. I'll drop in another one of my questions.
I have a question. Indeed, it was amazing, and as I wrote, I recognize the pattern to many organizations, these difficulties, and I believe that in your case, the difference was made by the strong commitment and the power to recognize the organizational problems. Well, my question is, can you explain or give more details about the framework that you used to land those employees? Because I'm having these questions because usually when an idea is going out of the design thinking process from the incubator and goes to business, some problems arise. Like the project goes further, but the employees are not, because FTEs, budget, and so how did it work exactly?
Did you mean the first method that I mentioned where I landed headcounts,
yes,
or the second where we replaced them with consultants?
No. I'm interested about internal, not replacement, about the landing.
Okay. So the first experiment then, when I showed the governance structure, then I was given 100 headcounts in my organization, but I didn't know their names. I didn't know who they were. They were numbers to me. And then we had a process where I took from these reserves, so to speak, and the organization came to me with proposals saying, we want to do this. And then we checked the proposal to our strategy. Does it align with our plans? And yes, most of the time it did. And then I said, okay, how much resource do you need? Oh, we need 3 headcounts for 3 years. And then I landed this possibility to employ resources through a period of 3 years. And when the project was closed, I took the possibility back to my organization and landed it to someone else. But it was still the line organization that was responsible for deploying a resource personnel to the project. And they could either recruit someone new or take someone more experienced and include them in the project. That was up to the line organization. But we were rather keen on knowing how do they plan to do it. That seems to be one of the issues throughout the processes. And there were many complaints on these setups, many of them saying we cannot move the resource allocation up and down that quickly. But we could always explain to them and say, well, you have maturity leave, you have the people being long-term sick, and you have other variations that are far more bigger than what we try to elaborate. Because if you consider that we have 100 headcounts, projects were typically 3 or 4 years long, so it was a variation of perhaps 20, 25, 30 every year, up and down. And it was in a system which had 3,000 employees. So it was really not a problem in reality.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Let's move on. I think Stephen had a follow-up question to his previous question about your answer about upper management and how they had been key. So his question is, what personal interaction tactics have you used?
Yeah. As a person, I'm rather focused on solutions. I want to create results. And I believe that that is one of the success factors that I have been able to show results, even with small means. I've been able to show results, and that builds, I would say, trust in my brand internally in the organization, and also trust that top management know that Tony is a guy that can make things happen. And over time, you can get more and more trust and more possibilities in terms of budgets or assignments, etc.
Brilliant, thanks. We have a question from Santiago. I always say that in a service vision, we are designing relations between people, product, teams, etc. on a big ecosystem. Do you know where we can improve / learn more about this?
I guess that the truth is out there somewhere. One way is being part of this kind of conferences to share learnings. But I really think that there is something about design thinking that we can embrace here. What we did and still do is trying to utilize design thinking on a system level. Because design thinking is focusing on the user very much. But in a business-to-business operation that Scania is, we need to understand the society needs. So really trying to converge design thinking into applying it on the system needs, on the society needs as well.
Nice, thanks. We have a question from Hussein. How did the employees internalize the new approach, exploit, explore? What was the role of HR, and how did you overcome the need for skill set upgrading?
Well, good question. It depends very much. It depends on the leadership, and coming back to that. Some parts of the organization realized that management didn't even tell them that you are employed to work on this project for 3 years and then we'll do something else. They just said you're employed here. And that was a bit hiding the reality for the employees, but I believe it was about concern. They didn't want to create a worry about the employees that being fired, but that was never the case. And upskilling, yeah, you can utilize actually this process to do upskilling, because if you include, I would say, rookie or someone that wants to learn new skills in a research project, in the research community, he or she will learn new things and they will be upskilled. But of course, you can utilize more classical methods like courses or going back to universities as well.
Thank you. We have a question from Rami. We saw failed business model for several offerings. Why was it difficult for new offerings to get working business models?
Well, I guess also it's about leadership and the culture. Scania has been very much focusing on the product and the product excellence, premium product, as I said. But if you talk about system solutions, it is not obvious. Taking platooning for an example, we knew that we could save fuel and the economy for our customers by reducing their drag and moving in a convoy. That was the fact that we could prove. But then you come to the hen and egg problem. How do we sell this to the first customer if he has no one else in the whole world to do platooning with? And then we realized, yeah, then we sell only to big fleets. Okay. But then these fleets need to have multiple vehicles operating from point A to point B at the same time in order to enable this. And that narrowed down the possibilities rather much. And in fact, we didn't know that much about our customer operations to tell them, you need to modify your logistical setup in order to have this advantage. So that was part of the problem. Another part was then, well, if we deploy it then, we could have multi-brand platooning between different of our customers. But then we need to have a sharing model in between. And then we need to have some micropayment system in between. The leading vehicle needs to be compensated from the one that's trailing behind. And that, I would say, was also difficult to explain to both our own organization, but also to the customers, why invest in that and what's the benefit. So we really had problems to calculate the business case for this. And I really don't think that we should do that, because we were in the innovators phase and we knew that we can sell this, but now I know we can sell it, but we need to have a different logic. It's not return on investment that we were trying to fit it in before.
Good, thanks. So a question from Horatio. The people you lent to other departments were evaluated by business line or by the innovation department, or was it mixed?
They were evaluated, if you talk about salary reassessment and other stuff, by the line organization, not by me. So I didn't have any influence on their salaries, the personal development, their career path, or anything like that. So you can say that I assigned the line organization came to me saying we want to do this, and I gave them the budget and the resource opportunity to realize what they asked for. But I didn't know by whom or how they proceed. And in many cases, they also decided after some time that they would do something else. My problem then was that most of the projects were funded by public agencies, and they require that we fulfill our commitments in terms of working hours and investments.
Interesting. Thanks. So I think we have time for one last question. So I could just pop in with, how will you know that your new approach works?
Well, it remains to be seen. As I stated, I know that we have some challenges left. But there are some things that are different this time. And one is that I am on the business development side of the company. Another thing is that the whole company has realized what I showed you before, that the world is changing. And now actually the whole company is transforming into something else, something that I've been pushing for many years. And by that said, it is now a demand or a pull from top management in my new role. They really request my services and these results. And we also have managed now in 6 months to produce the first vehicles. We have signed the first contracts with paying customers. So we're actually on our way. So it looks promising, but I guess there are some bumps in the road left. And then we need to tackle them when we experience them.
Brilliant. Good to hear. I think we'll need to wrap up there. Thank you so much, Tony, for sharing your insights. And thanks to all of you who listened and shared your questions. I know that Austin has shared the link to the next session there in the chat now, so you can go on to that one if you like. And of course, go ahead into the event platform and continue to engage there. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for listening.